Hi, and welcome to the Insiders by Durham Lane, where we get perspectives from industry thought leaders about strategies that are unifying marketing and sales cycles to help accelerate growth inside your world.
Welcome to the Insiders Sales and Marketing Podcast. I'm Simon Hazeldine. I'm a sales transformation strategist and sales performance consultant, helping my clients get more sales more often with more margin. I'm also a keynote speaker and author of several books on the topic of sales and negotiation. I'm your host, along with my co-host Richard Lane, who is the co-founder of Durham Lane, who are an inside sales partner that helps businesses to grow their revenue through an integrated sales and marketing methodology. Richard, great to be back in the Insiders studio with you, and we have another fantastic guest for our listeners. Over to you to make the introductions.
Thank you, Simon, and wonderful to be back. Hi to everybody. Well, I'm thrilled to be joined today by Ricky Sevta. Ricky is the Chief Revenue Officer at simPRO. simPRO, full disclosure, are a long-term customer of Durham Lane. I'm very proud of that fact. A rapidly growing global field service management software business. So, Ricky, pleasure to have you. Really looking forward to the conversation, and welcome to the Insiders podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard and Simon.
Wonderful. Ricky, what we normally do is just ask our guests to give us, a little bit of background on yourself and how you came to be in the role you're in currently, so our listeners can kind of get to know you a little bit. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Ricky, please.
Sure, Simon. I'll only take 15 minutes. So a little bit about me. Started off as an engineer, believe it or not. So I went down the route of mechatronics engineering, where I sort of had the passion of tinkering with things, breaking things and fixing things back up. Found myself working for a corporate on large buildings and construction sites, doing wonderful things. And again, kind of, just going back to my love of fixing and breaking things, did a lot of that. And then someone thought it was a good idea to throw me into management. So then I did the same and carried on the theme of breaking and fixing, but this time it happened to be with teams and people. So look, that's kind of my background. Fell into love with just dealing with the customers, dealing with whole array of different people, I guess. And that's where the passion for sales came in, and technology and engineering and sales. And I guess, cut the long story short, I found myself at simPRO. So that's where I've been for the last 4 years now.
Wonderful. Another member of the what we kind of call the Trip Up Club, Richard and I.
The Happy Trip Up Club, Ricky.
Happy Trip Up, yeah. Where we all ended up in sales, right? That's how it kind of happens, by all of these really strange routes that we tend to find with our guests. So, Ricky, you've previously worked with a big global company, and now you're working with what you described when we were having our sort of pre-chat before we recorded this session as more of a startup. What are the main differences you've seen?
Look, great question. Look, first things first, we're probably more of a mature startup now, but I still classify ourselves as a startup for the main reason being there's not much red tape. We do have the ability to experiment. We have the ability to test. We have the ability to roll out ideas. We have the ability to tinker with things. We have the ability to kind of adopt change, be flexible. The biggest difference, as you can start to sort of imagine, going back to my corporate world, is that there was a layer of approvals they had to go through. There was a lot of red tape. Whilst the ideas that everyone brought to the table were amazing, the execution took forever. Whereas in the startup environment, you really have the ability to change and flex every time you roll over. So that's the biggest difference I find between the two.
Yeah, wonderful. Less red tape. I think all of us who've worked in large corporates can probably identify with that one. And you're now leading it's a global organization. And how do you make sure that everyone's kind of, as you described it, rowing in the same direction? Because, you've got a lot of people there, right? A lot of different countries. It'd be really interesting to get your perception on that.
Yeah, I did use the phrase rowing in the same direction. It's a challenge. First things first, you got to acknowledge that you're dealing with a lot of different people, different background, diversity and culture, and all of that plays a big part. In order to get a buy-in, is you've got to make sure that your vision is clear. You've got to have the reasons behind as to why you're wanting to do certain things. You've got to have a purpose. once you've got that laid out, vision and a purpose, it's easy to get people's buy-in, and then you can wrap it around a lot of the support and have the team, as we identified earlier, going in the same direction. So it's going back to the main point of making sure your purpose is crystal clear for everyone in the organization, from bottom up and top down. Therefore, you can have that buy-in, or else it can be rather challenging exercise.
Yeah, and that's I think is a powerful message. I think for all people who are leading teams or leading organisations, about making sure that's in place. And Richard, you work with lots of different clients. What's your perception on how well people communicate that vision and purpose? I mean, Ricky's obviously doing a sterling job.
Yeah, absolutely. Ricky's right, and just some sort of immediate thoughts from listening to the first couple of minutes. It's that startup mindset, isn't it? It's the sort of lean startup type approach, Ricky, that you're talking about, and a topic that I think is really interesting, and something that Durham Lane are tackling at the moment as we get bigger is how do you keep that startup mentality culture flowing through the business, rather than allowing the layers of red tape and you need some of those, right? Particularly as as you're an international business, you need certain rules, processes, and procedures. But how do you make sure they don't stop you being agile and stop you being purposeful in your execution? And I think, Simon, to your point around that vision and purpose, I think that is the key. So keeping everyone facing in the same direction. I love Jim Collins' good to great, and get the people on the bus, get them all facing the right direction, and at some point get them all in the right seats, and then you go, right? So we've tried to live and breathe that over the last 11 years, and we've got some really, really strong stories of where that's been successful.
I think that is the overarching layer of making sure that everyone is then heading in the same direction. Second being the importance of what I call the sweet triangle, the tools, people, the process. You've got to make sure that once you do have the right people in the right seat, you're giving them the best of the tools. So in sales enablement plays a big part, right? And then what Richard and co at Durham Lane do really well is define the processes. Same at simPRO. So we're really hot on that. We've got to make sure that in order to gain consistency and in making sure that you all are constantly hitting your goals and your targets, you have the right processes. And those processes obviously need to be clearly defined, and then they have to be reevaluated, right? No processes can be one size fit all approach. It has to be constantly in a live environment, right? It's a work in progress. You've got to learn, and the environment that we've all been operating in businesses in the last couple of years, it's an ever-changing landscape. So again, being flexible, going back to what Richard was touching on earlier, I think that's the beauty of being in a startup mode. You have the ability to just go back, tinker, make the adjustment, and go back at it. So that plays a big part.
Yeah, cool. And in terms of that tools, people, process, your sweet triangle as you described it, specifically drilling down into the tools part, because I know this, I think, is a hot topic for people, who listen to the Insiders. I mean, there's so much tech available now. So in terms of tools, how do you make sure you pick the right technology or the right tech stack for your business?
Yeah, brilliant question. Simon, look, we've been through the experience. I've done it a few times over. I think you've got to make mistakes like anything else in order to actually learn that. And it can be quite a costly exercise, right? It's an expensive mistake to make in any organization. But going back to how do you pick any tools, it can be simplified. You've got to make sure as to what's the problem that you're trying to tackle first. It has to be no software, no tool out there is going to be 100% fit, but can you get to at least 80%? Right? You've got to recognize that. You've got to really kind of work on that piece and then go, what is the biggest challenge we're trying to work on as a team? And what tools do we need to get there? Sometimes one tool isn't enough. And, talking about sales enablement as an example, CRM is kind of more the single source of truth, but that's not the only thing you need nowadays, especially as we've identified in the last few years. The online selling is playing such a big part, so you need something more. Do you need a coaching tool on top of that? Do you need an artificial intelligence tool, which is picking up on, how much we're talking and the ratio of chat, and what part does that play in your coaching tips and tricks and your close win rates, and how do you then view the data? So do you need something else on top of that? Do you need a BI tool? And the list goes on and on and on, but initially it just depends on the size of the organization, the problem that you're trying to tackle first, and then just work your way up.
Yeah, it's really interesting comment about being really clear about what the problem is that you're trying to solve in the first place, which I think is people maybe go into it a little too shallow, don't they? And then rush ahead, and they realize they haven't done a root cause or whatever to find out what the actual problem is. Richard, from a Durham Lane perspective, in terms of the kind of tech you think is needed for to enable specifically, say, from a sales enablement point of view?
Yeah, I was just sort of listening to the conversation, thinking a great poll to do in the world of sales professionals would be what percentage of your tech stack is actually utilised, because I imagine it would be very low. From a sales enablement, just to sort of further on what Ricky was saying, I think that whole space around voice and AI intelligence is really interesting. We embedded from an early days of our business the 70-20-10 learning model, which I sort of brought with me from my corporate life. So that says that we learn 10% of what we learn through formal training courses. We learn 20% through coaching, formalized coaching programs, which we roll out inside our business. And then 70%, really importantly, through doing the job and being supported in the job. If you've got 1,000 people working at home, that becomes more challenging, right? So there are now technologies and tools that you can use to support that, whether it's being call coaching analysis, whether it's, I asked 25 questions in that discovery meeting, and, I only let my customer speak for 5% of the time, it didn't go well. So there are lots of tools. We use one here at Durham Lane, which works really well for us from that coaching and support point of view. The reason Durham Lane exists, actually, just as a side note, was because Lee and I got together. We met at a course I was delivering and had a discussion around creating a CRM system designed by salespeople for salespeople. This is sort of a dozen years ago. Realised that neither of us had any technical ability at all and thought that probably wasn't a good idea, and it was already becoming quite a crowded marketplace. CRM tends to be built by technical people for management, and certainly it's got better, but that was certainly where it came from. And the trouble with any tool is that you only get out what you put in, and the quality of what you put in is often not good enough. And I think that's an ongoing challenge for every business.
I mean, when I'm working with clients, we often put in help them to put in a really good sales management cadence. And one of the things that'll be in there will be like data hygiene some of the time. I mean, it's painful, right, to get it to a good place, but you have to get there, because if, like Ricky was saying, single source of truth ideally, but if half the information is missing. So, a lot of focus from leaders to make that happen.
Yeah, just on that, Simon, we talk about 4 things really, really passionately at Durham Lane: input, output, outcomes, and insight. And that insight piece, I think if I was in the shoes of my customer, that's really high value to me. So if our sales teams aren't inputting the right information through their activity and through creating the outcomes they create, then we're not going to have the insight to deliver back. So, adherent that you talk about hygiene. Hygiene is something that has to happen and has to happen often, I guess, is a definition. And that's a continual challenge, I think.
If I may add to that, the other thing is that tool has to be simple enough for everyone to use in the business, right? So it can't be counterintuitive. Going back to Richard's point, if it's too difficult, salespeople are the first to give up. All it just turns into is more admin for them, and every salesperson hates that. That's not good use of the time. So anything that can be embedded into their working environment, and there are great tools like that, which they can often just kind of piggyback onto your activity. They can take away a lot of the administration away from you. So that's also a big consideration as to when you're introducing it to a tool. The other thing I wanted to talk about was also the data-driven decision-making process. In places like simPRO, we are heavily reliant on that. Being a SaaS business that operate across several geos, We are constantly looking at trends. We're looking at how well one team is doing compared to the other, sort of driving the internal competition for people to thrive on, but also from external purposes. What activity are we seeing in particular industries? What are the macro trends? What are the micro trends are we seeing? Is it viable enough to actually sell our solution to a HVAC company in a period of shoulder season? Because they're going through a major shift in their workflow process. So those kind of things give us a lot of insights, and obviously on a really larger scale of things, it plays a big part when you go through the due diligence process for things like funding and the PEs and the VCs. Obviously, a lot of that stuff is required nowadays. So people forget the importance of data, as Richard touched on. I mean, obviously the quality has to be maintained, and we can talk about a little more about as to what we do at simPRO to ensure that data hygiene, as you highlighted earlier, is actually a priority, but making sure that everyone's in the habit of using a tool, and input is no longer an optional.
Yeah.
It's mandatory for a number of reasons.
Because if you haven't got the data, you can't gather the insight from it, can you? Which is, that's fundamentally the issue, right?
That's correct. The flow-on impacts are massive.
Ricky, can I ask sort of a follow-on question, if I may, from your point there? I'm really interested to know, because obviously simPRO as a business is more mature in certain markets. So are you able to use data and insight from what you're doing in one market to change your sales approach or execution in another market, for example?
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. That's kind of been, I would like to describe as one of our, point of difference in how we run our business. We have the ability to work across, as I was highlighting earlier, across geos. So what I tend to do, and the teams are really good, our teams are really get behind this, is that we do a lot of testing. So we're testing in different environments before we actually choose to roll out a concept, an idea. And that's where, again, the importance of data and the ability to work across geos plays such a big part. So like anything, you can do your testing phase, A/B testing, make sure it's going into the final draft, and then once the model is proven, we normally put it out into rollout mode across the teams.
Fantastic. It's I think it's often underlooked is the importance of testing, finding out, failing, we're learning from that, and then you hope your execution's going to be there. And I suppose linked to the topic of sort of execution, you mentioned in our sort of pre-chat that you had a particular passion about the importance of having a defined process for scalability, was the phrase that I captured from you. Can you expand on that, Ricky?
Absolutely. Again, as Richard would very well know, and we've had some conversation, there seems to be a level of madness that you often see in SaaS business in particular. It's always go fast, go hard, and go quick. But again, when you're flying blind, all you end up doing was you're hiring for the sake of hiring. You don't seem to have any data to back you up. Whereas what we tend to do is that we do a lot of modeling beforehand. We make sure that we're gathering the data. We're partnering up with the likes of Durham Lane and others in certain markets before we press the button to go live. We're very mindful of our quality of our, not just our solution, but our brand awareness and everything else that comes with it. So scalability to us is a responsibility and a corporate responsibility to our people, right? So therefore, we want to make sure that every person who comes and touches this organization, internally or externally, is set up for success. So that's what I meant, that everything that we tend to do at simPRO, whether it be for our customers, our partners, or our people, it's all geared up for success, and it's all geared for scale. And scale could mean different things depending on who you're speaking to, our customers, because they normally pick up simPRO as a solution and they go from $5 million turnover to a $50 million turnover business, and vice versa. Internally, we like to see a career progression pathways, but also we like to scale out our teams, and we like to scale out into different countries and different geos. So it has a lot of different meanings internally. But yeah, I just can't emphasize the importance of data. It plays into all our decision making, going and entering into new territory, going after a new vertical, going after what I keep coming back to Richard and what we've been dealing with. We've been quite open about this is outbound. So going from inbound to outbound and hybrid and going into partnership model. All of that is based on the entire fundamental of scaling the business and making sure that we are powering on and we're providing a better solution for our existing customers, but we're reaching out to further prospects in all different industry that we touch.
Yeah, it's a very strong, you can pick up, Ricky, your passion for that data-based decision making and how important it is, because I think a lot of people, they kind of fly by the seat of their pants, don't they, right? Or are not using that. That's the danger you make. You can make some spectacularly bad decisions without it.
Or you just continue to do what you've always done. That's the other risk, isn't it?
Yeah.
Particularly in this sort of environment.
I think a lot of times you fall into the trap of 80-20, right? A lot of your revenue either comes from the 20% of the people, or or your revenue is coming from 20% of your customer base. The model that we like to run by, or definitely is one of our mission and at least an inspiration, is to get to the 80-80 model. Right, so 80% of the people, reps are constantly successful quarter over quarter, month by month, and same with our customer base. So again, going back to what Richard was touching on earlier, you want to try and take guesswork out of the business as much as you can. Business should be about calculated risk as opposed to just stupid risk that I think you see a lot, especially in the tech sector, because when things are going great, I think anyone can be successful. It's just when you start to see some noise within the market, that's the true testimonial of your business and not only your the team that you've actually built and the credibility of your solution, but it just also comes back to the enablement and all the data that you've actually captured that's going to see you through these tough times.
It's fantastic. I've got a vision of the ghost of Vilfredo Pareto, whatever, turning in his grave as Ricky attempts to totally disrupt the 80-20 principle. So you'll be upsetting the long passed away Italian economist on that one, won't you? So. And you mentioned when we were talking before the importance of maintaining a deep focus and avoiding getting distracted by what you called the next shiny object. And I think that's a fascinating kind of perspective to have. Can you explain how you can get that deep focus and maintain it?
I'll try my level best. It's again one of those topics that you can talk about until the cows come home, but we live in this environment, as you very well know, Simon, where you are the information overload, as I like to describe it. It's coming at you from all different directions. It's noisy. We're living in this digital age. We're living in this social media environment. We're living in where any news is only good for 60 seconds or 2 minutes. Right? So same goes into the business when you're working in a place like simPRO, which is full of hope and full of opportunities, and the TAM and the SAMs of what we touch are massive. You can so easily be distracted by, again, going back to what I was describing as the next shiny object. It could be the next new market. It could be the next new industry. All of a sudden you can go, hey, why don't we go look here? However, the deep focus, and I'm almost start to guess again what I'm going to come back to, is data. It all comes and lives in the data, right?
Yeah.
It's all about, this is our ideal customer profile. This is our sweet spot. Let's stick with what we are good at, because no point going and experimenting constantly. Yes, we spoke about the changeability and the flexibility and adapting and doing all of those things. However, you still need to have safeguard rails. You need to be able to swim in the swimming lanes, or else, like if you were an Olympic swimmer, you're not going from lane 1 to lane 8, are you? You're just constantly going up and down, and you're trying different strokes and you're trying different techniques. And I think same must be applied to the sales teams in particular. We are easily distracted just by what comes our way. And you just got to keep going back to, these are the main, it's almost a checklist in your head to go, this is what we do best. Let's just go back here. And that's, I feel like we do really well at simPRO. Our teams understand the importance of ICPs and where our solution is sticky, and we get, where we get the best return on investment, and where we get most runs on the board. So all of those things are critical to business success.
I sometimes use the phrase shooting fireworks syndrome, Ricky, which is I've worked for a number of people in the past where the firework shoots off and they get all excited and tell the whole team, this is wow, look at this. Next month it's another firework, right? And that's the we're probably now living in the, like you say, information overload. This attention deficit is the issue, probably. It's not like how do customers find out information? Is they're swamped, absolutely bombarded with it, and they sometimes need re-educating, don't they? Think they know the answer, and in reality it's just a state of informed confusion.
100%. I like to describe my role internally in the business as Chief Repeat Officer.
That's great.
So, So I think that's going back to your original question. How do we make sure that we stay on top of where we need to be? It's just you constantly have to repeat yourself, and I think our leaders in the business have to do the same. Yeah. And I think after a while it becomes, 26 times that you do it becomes a habit. I think it's the same kind of thing in a salesperson.
I mean, Richard, you mentioned Jim Collins, and I've seen Jim Collins speak. He talks about turning the flywheel to get something in place. And I very fondly remember him saying the businesses often, they turn it once and then they go, wow, that was hard work. Let's go and do something else. and it never becomes embedded in the business. What's your from Durham Lane, Richard? How do you keep the focus for your folks?
Well, I'm going to call Ricky from now on the Chief Repeat Officer. I love that because that is, I mean, what a great lesson for anyone listening wanting to make change happen. I think change goes through a curve, doesn't it? And what I think can be, and we are 100% guilty of this through our history as a business, is of that firework mentality. We've had definitely occasions I can sit here and smile and think of when we've done a big announcement and then it all gets to be a bit hard work, so we go off and find something else to do, and you go through that cycle. So I think we're a lot better at that than we were. And I'm a real sucker for analogy, so I'm just going to come back to Ricky's swimming analogy there. I love that because keep in the lane, but experiment with different strokes. I think that's, for me, that's a really great way of thinking about how do you remain agile, fleet of foot, but focused. And actually, it's that sort of helps probably get you away from that firework mentality, doesn't it? Because I know I can't go out of the lane, but the lane's wide enough for me to have some flex, and I can experiment with what happens inside the lane, but I need to stick in it. So yeah, repeatability. So it's really great to be able to interview a Chief Repeat Officer. It's excellent.
I love it.
My pleasure.
I've seen some funky job titles in my time, right? Particularly in startups and things that are people there, evangelist and that sort of thing. But Chief Repeat Officer is the first for me, I've got to say. I was Richard as well, I think, mentioning there the keeping in the lane also just reminds me of that famous the story that people tell about the rowing team and the phrase, does it make the boat go faster? And if it doesn't make the boat go faster, we won't spend any more time. And I used to work in the drinks industry, and I remember I had a boss, we were in one of the big brewing companies, and at meetings he'd often say, is this conversation going to help us to sell more beer or not? If not, let's finish it as quickly as we can and get onto something useful. I remember him saying, does it help us sell more beer? If not, let's move on.
Yeah, well, it just comes back to, we talked earlier about vision and purpose, and it comes, I'm just sitting here reflecting on Durham Lane as a business, and as you get bigger and as you get more layers of people that look after the people that do the work, as it were, then different conversations spark up and people get obsessed about different things which aren't necessarily driving our customers forward and therefore driving us forward. So I think you've got to be really mindful of that, and I think, to Ricky's point earlier, vision and purpose helps bring you back, keep you in the lane. And we should be experimenting all the time with how do we improve what we do and how do we do what we do more effectively.
No, it's a great one, I think, for all the listeners to kind of reflect on as well. And Ricky, kind of final question. How's your engineering background influenced your chief repeat officer role or chief revenue officer role, whichever one you prefer?
Yeah, look, great question. I'll try and give you an answer which is not long-winded, but I think I touched on it earlier. It's the ability to tinker and break things and fix things. So what I mean by that is Lego pieces, for example, right? My kids, they love Legos, and I used to love Lego as a little boy. But once you built it, following the instructions, you can get it all nicely as how it's meant to look on the, in front of the box. And then after a while, you break it down, and the pieces end up everywhere. But then you've got to, by that time, you've thrown out the instruction booklet. And that's where the whole engineering mindset comes in. You've got to find all those little pieces. You're trying to build it back up. It may not entirely look like what it looked like the first time in front of the box, but it's going to get close to, right? You have to then use your mind. You have to use that vision. You've got to realize that what it looked like, and you've got to, go back into your memory bank. And it's that kind of mindset has triggered into a lot of our business practice and what I've been able to do here at simPRO. It's some of the strategies that we drive. It's like, okay, it's not going to work the first time around. We're going to test it here. We're going to roll this out. We talked about, briefly touched on RevOps and the importance of data and what we've been able to do there. We talked about strategy. So very much was a business that was built on inbound. So, again, going into outbound and pairing up with the likes of Durham Lane and driving that and lifting our teams and going into a very different partnership type of model. So it comes back into, and so I'm giving you a very mixed answer here, but I think just able to experiment is what's kind of been, I guess, been one of those big things for me. And, I feel like it's helped me and has helped our business and the teams along the way, and just teaching me not to have all our eggs in one basket, just making sure there is dual strategies in play. Again, highlighting the importance of staying within the lane, having a clear purpose, testing things before rolling it out. So all of that, I feel it's come from very early on and what I learned in the engineering school, and that's kind of carried on within the business principles.
Yeah, that's a fascinating insight. And I think we've had so much great ideas and commentary from you, Ricky. Thank you so much. But I think for me that what stands out is this, yes, experimentation, but within focus, within sticking in the lane. That wonderful analogy that Richard picked up on was, experimenting with your strokes, but staying in lane, which I think definitely really, really powerful. So thank you very much for sharing all of your insight and ideas and wisdom, Ricky. It's been fantastic. Richard, any closing thoughts or comments from you?
Really, knew it was going to be a great conversation, Ricky, and not been disappointed. So thank you, and I'm really hope our listeners take as much away from it as I have. A couple of I've scribbled loads of notes, but breaking and fixing, love that idea. Startup mindset, no matter how big your organization gets. So get that lean startup book up and keep reading. Vision and purpose, the sweet triangle with tools, people, and process. So we need tools to support us, to support the processes that we create, but we need great people. Jim Collins' analogy of the right people on the bus facing the same direction in the right seats. And then always be scaling. Always be scaling, keep in your lane, but try different things. So and repeat. So
always repeat yourself. Always be repeating.
My Lego memory is the crucial pieces in the vacuum cleaner. That was the.
That's it. In the bin.
My Lego memory, my younger brother, who never ceases to do this, I think it's some bitter childhood trauma, is my mother and father would always say, put the Lego back in the box, right? Put the Lego back in the box, tidy up. So I just grab this plastic box and do my half by scooping it through the middle and then handing it over to my brother who had all the scattered parts. And he reminds me about it about once every year or so. So it's clearly...
Yeah.
But that's older brother's prerogative, right?
Deep trauma, yeah. We talked about deep focus. This is deep trauma.
Yeah.
Everlasting.
Lego trauma. That's what my younger brother needs treating for.
But no, it's been a
Cheers.
real pleasure, Ricky. Thank you so much.
Yeah, wonderful, Ricky.
Thank you for both having me. Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Richard.
And thanks very much. And to all our listeners, thanks very much for listening into this episode. I'm sure you've picked up some fantastic thoughts and ideas, and look forward to having you on another episode in the future. So thanks very much.
The Insiders by Durham Lane. Subscribe today to never miss an episode.